Okay.
Sophia Coyle.
Sophia, right?
Sophia Coyle.
Okay, got that, Michael.
Councillor Lennon's having trouble getting in.
Okay. But we'll just go to the planning applications. The first one is page 70 to 26. Intelligent Land Investments Group. It's a residential development in principle, land to the west of Alton Road, Waterloo, Wishaw, and the recommendation is refused. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Second one is 27 to 43, North Lanarkshire Council. It's a relocation of New Mains and St Bridges Primary School, New Mains Family Centre, shared campus, etc. And it's site to north of St Bridges Primary School, Park Drive, New Mains, and the recommendation is grant.
Agreed.
Agreed.
And that will have to go to the Scottish Ministers because there's an objection from SEPA. Okay. Next one is pages 44 to 64. BW Trading Limited, Cala Homes, Garnkirk Estates. Approval of matters specified in conditions 1 to 4 of planning permission in principle. Residential development land at the north of Cumbernauld Road and east of Hornshill Farm Road Steps. There has been a request for a hearing on this one. It meets the criteria, so I agree we continue for a hearing. Agreed. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Agenda item 3.
Convener, I think Councillor Anderson was looking to come in on that one. I don't know if she still wants to come in.
Oh, you want in on that one?
No, it's okay, thanks.
All right, fine. Agenda item 3 is a notice of planning enforcement appeals lodged, pages 65 to 66. Agree to know them? Agenda item 4, planning and enforcement appeals decisions, pages 67 to 68. Again, there for noting. Agenda item 5, I had to look at the date. I thought it was the 1st of April when I seen this one coming in. It's a listing of a civic centre, Motherwell by Historic Environmental Scotland, pages 69 to 74. Does anyone want to speak to that? Or just note it? They're quite happy to note it.
Can I ask a question there? Sorry.
Yep.
What does that actually mean for the future of the civic centre? What if we ever want to change any of the building? What sort of extra steps are we going to have to go through in order to do that? Because obviously Des had plans to do a lot of stuff with the civic centre. And what does that actually mean for the future of it?
Lorna?
Yeah, thank you, convener. The listing doesn't cover every element of the civic centre complex. The internal element of the main office buildings are not covered by the listing, and some aspects of the concert hall, namely the sort of lift shafts and stuff that have been added on in recent years. But the internals of the main, the court, the concert hall, theatre, the council chambers, they've all been listed. So if the council proposes to make any alterations to those, they'll have to apply for listed building consent. So it's another step in the process. If we were to make any changes, it doesn't stop us doing things, it just adds a layer of control over what we do.
Okay, Councillor Alan Stubbs.
Thanks, Harry. I think I've got to agree with you. I couldn't to look 2 or 3 times to see if I was reading this correctly. How did this process begin? Who decided that? Did somebody locally apply for it to be listed, or did Historic Scotland just come in and decide that they were going to do it, or whatever it's called? It's probably not Historic Environment Scotland. Sorry. What really strikes me from this report is that the only decent looking bit of the civic centre is the bit that's not been listed, and that's the glass fire escape that attaches to the chamber. Is there anything open to the council to appeal this? I mean, obviously Motherwell's not my area, but I can't believe that we're getting to a situation where buildings like this are being listed. It really, I mean, I've never heard anybody describe it as much more than a monstrosity. And there's obviously big plans across the whole of North Lanarkshire, but if we're talking specifically about Motherwell, one of them is to do away with the Civic Centre altogether, get rid of the building and put something decent there instead, and move the staff and everybody out of there into something that's fit for purpose. I don't get the justification that because it was a respected architect that we should lift this. We're demolishing buildings all over the country that look like this because it was of its time and it should stay there in its time.
Yep.
So are the council planning to appeal this, or is that even open to it? And
Lorna, could we appeal this?
Where did this process start?
Right, I'll maybe just go through that in sort of chronological order. I believe a submission was made to Historic Environment Scotland. We don't get information on who makes suggestions. Historic Environment Scotland can choose buildings to list on their own. They do surveys of buildings across the country on a reasonably regular basis, or any member of the public can suggest a building for listing. We were notified a while ago about this proposal. I think it was just pre-lockdown. I remember having a discussion in the Civic Centre about it, so it was just pre the lockdown. And the council did actually make representation at that point in time. We carried out some work. We got external consultants to look at the building and to help us make a case against the listing, because we weren't convinced that it should be listed. But that was unsuccessful, and hence have gone ahead with the listing. It's been listed, and we can't appeal that process now. We had our chance when we made our case at the start of the process. It's been listed because it seemed to be an important building in terms of the modernist movement. There is a lot of listing at the moment of sort of 1960s and 70s modernist architecture. We go through phases on this type of thing. I suppose if you look at internals, people's furniture purchases and things, in sort of 1950s and 60s modernism is quite fashionable at the moment. So the building's seen as a really good example of a complex that was constructed to cover all civic requirements. And that's what it did at the time. And we have argued that it is of its time and that things have moved on. But that appeal, those claims weren't upheld by Historic Environment Scotland. So we are where we are. We can still make proposals if we could even ask to demolish the building, but we would have to make a case for that. But as I say, we tried to do that at the time. We said the building wasn't really fit for purpose, it was expensive to adapt, but Historic Environment Scotland didn't agree.
Yeah, it was quite ludicrous. I mean, I was reading a few months ago that there was the multi-stories in Aberdeen. They've got a historic grade 2. That's unbelievable. It makes me feel really old because I remember it getting built. I was at school when the Civic got built. So it's now. So I dare say they'll need to put a listed building on me next. I've got a couple of other people. Michael McPake might speak.
Thanks, Chair. I won't comment on your age comment, Sarah. I'll leave that to you. But basically, I think Alan Stubbs, I totally agree with Alan in this, and Lorna's already summed up what I was going to say, basically. I mean, I heard about this just about a year ago as well, and talking to one of the senior officers about another matter, and this came up, and I nearly fell off a chair at the time. I thought, what? How could this be? But you're absolutely right. It was in the papers earlier on this week about Aberdeen, a set of flats up there, 1960s. Everybody sees them as an eyesore, but they've been listed as well. Where we go from here, I think we really need to see what we can do with this, because I don't think anything like this should get in the way of our plans going forward for North Lanarkshire. I think the plan for North Lanarkshire will overcome this eventually. So I'll leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Councillor Johnson? Tom? You're on mute, Tom.
Yes.
Right, carry on. Now.
Just to draw your attention to of the structure may have an impact in terms of ongoing costs to maintain the special character of the building. Now, who would foot these costs? Would it be totally the council, or do people who own listed buildings have a source of funding support?
Would the council take it?
Another thing I'd like to point out is when they reorganised local governments, there was a lot of good luck and bad luck. For instance, in South Lanarkshire, they ended up with very, very spacious buildings for their council and county buildings, whereas we all had to cram into a building which was designed for Motherwell and Wishaw Council.
Yep.
So all sorts of things come into play here. But what sort of support would we get as owners of a listed building?
Very little, I would expect. Lorna?
Yes, Historic Environment Scotland does have a grants section, but they do tend to focus on A-listed buildings, and so ones that are of national and international importance. And unfortunately, whilst the Civic Centre is considered good, it's not considered to be that good. So it's likely that the council would be expected to foot any additional costs required because of the standard of any works that would be necessary to meet the requirements of the listing.
Thanks, Laura. Councillor Douglas, Trevor?
Obviously, everyone was saying that it was not a particularly nice looking building, but we have to remember we're sitting here with buildings that we tore down 20, 30 years ago that we now regret that we tore them down. And I suspect in another 50 years, we may look back on this type of building and go, oh, you know, it was kind of different and it was kind of ugly, but it's kind of swings and roundabouts. 50 years time, there could be people sitting there going, thank God that North Lanarkshire Council, thank God that Historic Scotland saved that building, because there's none of them left. So you need to take the positive where you can find it. I'm kind of in favour of it.
Interesting point. Thanks, Trevor. Councillor Lennon?
I'm actually in agreement with Councillor Douglas, something I never thought would really happen in this committee, to be perfectly honest. Again, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and all you need to do is travel to Europe to see some Art Deco buildings and things like that were monstrosities of their time, but are now vastly massive tourist attractions. And I think that in this committee, let's not be too quick or too hastily judging this concept. In relation to the long-term future, I'm sure Lorna will agree, funding packages could be put in place for external funders to look at this as well. So opportunities might be wide and varied, but there should be something that we could tie it down to a long-term sustainable plan. And the other point that I would make in this as well, Harry, and perhaps Lorna can indulge me a wee bit, how much investment have we put into that building since the last council term, particularly in upgrading it? Because if you walk through that building now, especially the first couple of levels, it's actually quite welcoming, especially when you look at the conference facilities and various other things. So it's just to see how much money has been invested.
Orla?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't have that information to hand. I don't know how much we spent on those improvements. But I think those improvements just convinced Historic Environment Scotland, when they visited the building, that it was flexible enough to be adapted to public requirements.
Supplementary then, Chair, perhaps
Yes.
Lorna could get me that information and send me off table, if that's okay.
Right, send to all the members of the planning when we get the information how much money we've spent in the building since the changes from the region down to the North Lanarkshire. And okay, I've got Councillor Quigley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with the majority of previous speakers, where I was absolutely shocked when I read that paper. I would never have listed the Civic Centre as something that we would want to preserve and keep beside the cost. And if we have to carry that cost, I think it's something that we just cannot afford. we have a building in Shotts. It's of great architectural interest throughout Europe, etc. That's the old Cummins building. And the people who own it have just let it go to rack and ruin, and it's now become an eyesore. And I really think that that's what could happen to the Civic Centre. Is there any way that we could sell that building?
I think the demand for, given after COVID, when more and more people will be staying at home, working from home, then I think the demand for big buildings like that, for big office spaces, I think in general the market will struggle. That's my personal opinion. Lorna, you want to touch on that?
I mean, we can try and sell the building if the council's decision ultimately was to try and demolish the building. We would have to go through marketing anyway to demonstrate if there is a market for that type of use or not. The complication, I suppose, with this building is it's linked to the theatre and the concert hall, which makes it a bit more complicated if we were to market it. Finding a user that wanted to take on that combination of uses would be quite unusual. So it's not an easy building to do anything with, and that was part of the argument that we put forward when the listing was first proposed.
I've got Michael McPake and then Alan Stubbs, and then we can obviously note the report.
Chair, thanks very much for letting us back in, and it's just on a couple of points that Greg made, Greg Lennon, when he speaks about the art decor of the building and the throughout Europe. I'd point you to the direction of St Peter's Seminary in Cardross, which I would imagine was built around about the same time as the Civic Centre in the early the 60s, and that is seen as one of the most iconic buildings in Scotland for its period. Unfortunately, that's been left to rack and ruin, and whatever has been tried to help there has just not proved successful. I think it's now to be demolished. But on the other point that Greg made regarding the recent works that have been done in the Civic Centre over the last couple of years, that was necessary work, because basically since the change of government, local government, 1996, I think it was.
95, yeah.
It hadn't been any upgrading of the building since then. So 25 years later, we had to do a certain amount of work to it. And to do it properly, I mean, to do the windows, for instance, which do need done, you're talking about £2 or £3 million just to do the windows. And that is just the start of it. So it's it's like throwing a massive money into a big black hole, is what I can see. So I'll leave the comments there. Thanks, Chair.
Yep. I've got Alan Stubbs there, I've got Greg coming back in. Can we make them brief? Because a lot of this stuff is out with the actual report. So, it's got to be further down the line when this plan for North Lanarkshire comes into force, and there will be plenty of debates about it. So, Alan and then Greg.
I think you've covered my point there, Harry. My very brief point was that it would be interesting to hear very soon, if whatever committee it is that deals with it, if the council's plans remain unchanged, that the Civic Centre, the headquarters of the council, is going to move to somewhere like Maxim Park, or a serviced office building, or if the council plans to remain at the Civic Centre on the back of this decision.
Okay, right, thanks, Alan. Greg, you want to quick comment?
My point's really quick. I'm happy to take it off table with Councillor McPake, the cultural musings of North Lanarkshire. So just if he wants to sit and discuss it off table, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, thank you. So agree to note the report. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6 is the planning performance framework, pages 75 to 84. Is it yourself, Lorna?
Yes, thanks, Convener. This is a report that all of the planning authorities in Scotland voluntarily produce on an annual basis, and it's submitted to the Scottish Government for them to review our performance over the previous year. This sets out a performance over 2019-20, which seems a long time ago now, because we're about to start writing the one for last year. Our performance was Our timeframes for dealing with planning applications did slip a bit in this year, but we were still performing as well, if not better, than the average for Scotland, and ahead of our sort of meeting our targets that are set by the government. We've been going through a period of change in the service. We've had new staff brought in. We've changed the structure of the teams. We've had changes to the IT system that we use and to deal with planning applications. So it's been a time of change for us, and I'm reasonably content that we are performing at the best of our ability for that year. The report also sets out the proposed areas that we were working on to review in the current year, which is 2021. So we are looking at the whole point of the report is to ensure that we are trying to continually improve the service and make adjustments as we go along, so that our performance is maintained and, where possible, improved. So we're just setting out what we're trying to deal with through this year as well, and there'll be a further report on that in due course. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thanks, Lorna. Councillor Logs.
Yeah, page 83, if you look at the chart on page 83, you'll see that year 17 to 18 was by far the best year. And year on year, we have slipped from the figures on 17-18. Were we doing anything different in 17-18? And can we go back maybe to the figures of 17-18? Because there is a considerable drop from 17-18 to 19-20 in all three categories.
Lorna?
Yeah, there were changes to the structure of the service, and that was the time that we changed the planning service, and the big restructure happened, so that we changed from having the head of planning to planning and regeneration. We lost one of the managers at my level, and we started to change the teams to try and deal with the sort of reduced resources that we had available to us. So that was where things started to change. We're continually reviewing those changes to see if they are the right things that we've done, or if we should be changing back. Sometimes things take a wee while to bed in. We've had a further change this year with the move to home working, which has changed how staff are operating again. So at the moment, we're going through a process of continual change, but we do continue to review our performance, and we're doing that on a much more regular basis now to try and improve wherever we can.
Just a supplementary, if structural changes have caused detriment, then perhaps we need to look at that and review it, because certainly we want to go back to where we were in 17-18 when the figures were on a national basis the best in Scotland, and clearly there's been slippage since then. So it's an issue that Pamela and her team need to look at, review, and come forward if there is a need to make other structural changes or increase in staffing establishments to try and get us back to where we were in 17-18.
Pam?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as Lorna said, and I think we're constantly looking at where there might be opportunities to make improvements or to change how we're delivering the service. And I mean, I suppose it's an obvious point, but I mean, obviously the figures tell one story, but I mean, there's a lot that goes on, as you know, behind all of the statistics in terms of the engagement with applicants and the time it can sometimes take, particularly with some of the more complex sites in terms of getting all the necessary information. So the statistics, as you rightly point out, tell one story, but there's obviously a lot more to it than that. I think what Lorna was saying, though, the structure and how we organise is one thing, but you have to recognise that the service there has been a significant reduction in the resources that the planning service has. So it's you can't ignore that. I think what we have been able to do, though, relatively recently, is bolster and go back and increase some of the resource in the service, and we've had to look at ways maybe how we can fund that. And that's included looking at the ambition programme and opportunities to fund maybe some of the posts through that route. So it is something that we're constantly looking at, and obviously where we can, you know, if we can get more resources, then we'd definitely be looking at opportunities to do that.
Thanks, Pam. Craig Lennon, Councillor Lennon.
Thanks very much, Chair. And 4.3 of the report, point 4, where development standardised approach to developer contributions. It's just to ask a quick question of officers. I take it the rate of inflation will be built into that model. It will be taken into account when we're looking at developer contributions.
Lorna?
Yeah, developer contributions are index linked.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anyone else. Any other questions? Agree you note the report? Thank you very much. Thanks very much for your attendance. Over to you, Bill, for local review update.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll not bother with a break just now because we're meeting only really lasted 25 minutes. I usually do that if it's over 45. So we can head straight into the local review body meeting today on the 25th of February. We've got 2 items on the agenda. First one's declaration of interest. Do we have any? I don't think there'll be any difference from the last one. Maybe there will be. Anyone? No? Okay, moving on to item number 2, which is a planning application 20/00326/FUL, which is the erection of a dwelling house on land south of Medrocks Cottage, Gain and Shankburn Road, Annet Hill. It's in pages 5 to 85. You can see the stages 1 to 4, which we'll go through, and the decision notice, page 7 to 10. And I think, Gordon, you're up today.
Yes, thanks, convener. Morning, councillors. Can everyone hear me okay? I had a little technical glitch there. Good. Excellent. As you've pointed out, convener, the application is for the erection of a dwelling house land at south of Medrocks Cottage or South Medrocks Villa, depending on how it's described, again in Shankburn Road, Annet Hill. Your papers contain, as has been mentioned, the decision notice, notice of review, the report of handling, representations received from interested parties, including consultations, extracts of the relevant policy documents, and in pages 75 to 85, photographs and map extracts containing location plans, photographs of the site, and one of the layout plans actually is superimposed on an aerial photograph. Those photographs show the setting of the site, surrounding roads, further aerial shots to give a better appreciation of the context, and at the end of that package, a copy of a local plan extract. Now hand back to you, convener, for agreement if there's sufficient information to carry on.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Gordon. If we've agreed that we've got the sufficient information to determine this application, we'll move on to items stages 2 and 3, if we're happy, colleagues.
Agreed.
Thanks, convener and councillors. I'll now briefly outline the proposal, the policy position, the report of handling and subsequent decision, consultations, representations and the application for review to assist you in reaching a decision. As indicated, the proposal is for the construction of a single-storey 4 to 5 bedroom dwelling. Application site was previously considered as part of the garden ground of South Medrocks Villa, and it's intended to site a proposed new house in an east-west access to the south of the existing house. You can see that on your agenda pack, photographs and site layouts. The site plan, floor plan and the elevations are on pages 81 to 84, and the applicants also included them in their application for review. In terms of planning policy, the report of handling, pages 23 to 26, covers consideration of planning policy. The application raises no strategic issues in terms of Clyde plan, strategic development plan, and it can therefore be assessed in terms of North Lanarkshire Local Plan 2012. Local Plan map extract, as I've indicated, is on page 85, and the policies in the North Lanarkshire Local Plan and associated guidance referred to in the report of handling are detailed in pages 49 to 74 of your papers. And these in particular are policy NBE3A, assessing development in the Greenbelt. As you can see from the local plan extract, the site lies within the Greenbelt, and there is associated supplementary planning guidance note 07 on assessing development in the Greenbelt. Planning officer's report handling considered that no information had been submitted that would justify the proposal against the provisions of that plan policy and also the guidance. However, I should point out that should members accept the principle of development in relation to those policies, policy DSP4 quality of development, which members will be familiar with from previous LRDs, would also be a material consideration, and that is actually discussed in the report of handling as well. Report of handling recommends the proposal should be refused permission for the reasons outlined on page 26 of your papers, and the reasons of refusal and the notice of refusal on pages 8 and 9. Application was subsequently refused planning permission on the 25th of September 2020. I now highlight consultations carried out, representations received in relation to the application, and the review application itself to assist you in further consideration and assessment of the case. There were 3 consultations carried out in relation to the application. NLC Regulatory and Waste Solutions and Green Space Development didn't raise any objections, but intimated conditions that should be attached and considerations that should be undertaken should the planning application be granted. Traffic and Transportation section objected in relation to the applicant's ability to achieve the desired visibility displays from the access point indicated on the development proposal plans that you have in front of you. You may note that it's indicated in the report of handling that this objection could be resolved by sharing an access with the existing South Medrocks Villa, although I don't understand that any plans to that in that regard have actually been submitted. Consultation responses is on pages 27 and 28, 43, 44 and 45 of your papers respectively, and discussion on them is on page 25 of the report of handling. In terms of representation, 2 letters of objection in relation to the application were received on behalf of owners of the neighbouring property, and these can be found on pages 29 to 42 of your papers, with the report of handling summarised on page 25. A further letter on behalf of the objectors was received in response to a notification as part of this application for review, and this is on pages 46 to 47 of your papers. The submission supports the refusal of planning permission, highlights the reasons for refusal, and seeks to rebut the points raised in the review statement and the documents associated with it. Application and review, as you will know, is on pages 11 to 22 of your papers, and as I've already indicated, includes copies of elevations and layouts, and also a copy of the letter previously submitted in justification of the application. The actual statement of review itself expresses in summary the applicant's view that the proposal does not affect neighbouring property and suggests potential of a site visit, that the refusal was based on objections received as part of the application process, that any design matters and concerns can be resolved through discussion. The applicant's letter of justification had not been considered as part of the application, and that other unspecified examples of such proposals exist within the local area. As with all applications, each case requires to be considered on its own merits and in accordance with the policy, unless material considerations outweigh the provisions of the policy. These are the factors and issues which will require to be considered by the local review body when determining the application. I'll now hand back to you, Convener, for agreement in the policy position, the material considerations and any questions members may have in pursuance of making a decision and giving a reasoned justification. Thank you.
Okay, Gordon, thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Any questions from anyone? I can see one there coming. Is it from Michael? Michael, just before you start, can I, if anyone wants to speak, do not put any proposals up or recommendations until after everyone's had a chance to speak. Michael.
Thanks, Convener. Graham, there's a couple of questions here and a couple of comments as well. I mean, at the outset of this, it states it's in the green belt, and quite clearly the house, South Medrocks Villa there, as you can see on page 16. Historically, colleagues, for any who may know this area, I can remember that being a working piggery in there. So the present house in South Medrocks Villa, I think that was built about 15 years ago to make sure that the man that lives in that now so that it could be near his father, who owned South Medrocks Farm, which is across the way here, across the road. So he built that house on existing agricultural land. So therefore, to say it's in the Greenbelt is, to me, I'm just baffled by it, because I can remember it being a piggery, and I'm not that old. The other part of it, if you go to the visibility where the roads made comment, if you look at page 16, it's quite clear, and thank to the service for these wonderful, colourful photographs we're getting now. If you look at the entrance, proposed entrance, in comparison to South Medrocks, if you look at the comparison to the junction there, coming up Mollinsburn Road, it's actually, it gives you more view from the junction. So I don't see where the roads are objecting there. Colleagues, at this point in time, you know, without reading too much into this, this application is exactly what happened in 2005 or 2006, whenever South Medrocks Village was built. That house was built to let the farmer's son be near him in his dotage, in his older age, and his mother's house was just round the corner here. And this is exactly what's happening here. It's to allow the applicant to be near his mother and partner in their dotage. And I would suggest that that's been missed out here. So I'll leave it there, colleagues, just now.
Gordon, any comments on that?
I'll comment firstly that we can't take any credit for this particular photograph because it was submitted by the applicant, although we do endeavour to use aerial photographs as part of our presentations now. In relation to the matter of roads, as I had indicated, the report of handling has suggested that potential of moving the access is shown on page 16 to share it with the access to South Medrocks Villa. The particular concern, and this can be seen, I think, in photographs submitted by the objectors, is that there's a high wall which would limit the ability of the applicant to achieve visibility using this existing access. However, as indicated in the report of handling, that could be resolved should the access be moved. In relation to the question of the allocation of the land or identification of land within the Greenbelt, if this land, as I understand it was previously agricultural, that is a Greenbelt use. And if, as I understand it, South Medrocks Villa was built in relation to an agricultural use, then that could be considered to be appropriate use of the land under the Greenbelt policy. It would be for members to assess the Greenbelt policy and the justification for development within the Greenbelt policy, and to whether an applicant seeking to live close to a relative was a justification within the terms of that particular policy. Having checked the previous application, and not all the information is online because of the age of the application, there was an indication that the justification was in relation to agriculture at that time. Members would have to look at the justification that's been submitted in relation to this particular application and assess whether that met the requirements of the Greenbelt policy.
Okay, thank you for that. Michael, you okay with that?
Convener, can I just come in and maybe take us back a stage? I know Councillor McLaren's looking to come in. I think there was a point, apologies, Convener, I think there was a point during the course of the meeting where the local review body accepted the policy position and that the land was Greenbelt. I'm just confirming that position is accepted by the local review body before we move forward, because we did go back a stage and accepted, the local review body accepted that this land was actually Greenbelt, just for clarity.
Yeah, we did. You know how the local review body works with elected members. It's trying to get their purpose within, irrespective of what we've agreed to before it. Maybe that's something we need to look at in the future. But yeah, your point is noted. Michael's quite happy with that. So we'll move on to Alan now.
Bill, my point was only in relation to the representation from roads, and Michael's covered it. The access to proposed development only appears a few yards down the road from the access to the current house, and it certainly appears to me from the picture on page 16 that there's better visibility. And I'm not going to say that dispute what they're saying, but I can't get it into my head, and it comes back to yet again, and I think this might be the 50th time in the last few years that I've raised this, that we should have colleagues from roads and other services at these meetings to answer questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Noted. I've seen John McLaren's hand up, although you're not on the chat bar, John.
That's okay, thanks a lot. Just on that, I remember when that house was built, it was built on the old sow shed, because they used to keep the cattle was over on the main farm, and they had the piggery on the right hand side of the road next to South Medrick House. That's what it was built on, the sow shed, and Michael's absolutely right on that.
Okay, thank you for that information. Lynn?
Could we remind members that Greenbelt is a designation with a specific definition? It's not an opinion.
Take the words out of my mouth. Thank you very much for that. Okay, is that all from you, Lynn? Anything else? No? Okay, is there anyone else wanting to say anything before we go to a decision? Okay, there's no one else on the chat bar. I don't see any hands up, so I'm going, as I usually do, is I'm going to move the decision that was taken on the 2nd of November, which is on page 7 to 10, which is refused. Could I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, anyone otherwise minded? Okay, no one's otherwise minded. The decision
Chair, sorry, I'm otherwise minded. I put it in the chat bar there. I'm otherwise minded, Chair.
Sorry, Michael, come on quite slow. Right, okay. Michael, what's your proposal then?
My proposal is to grant this on the grounds of what I've already said, that the applicant here is only trying to do what the applicant did at South Medrick's Villa 15 years ago, to be near his parents who are in their older age. I think it's not a backyard development, as you can see. It's quite clearly got its distinctive exit and egress. This is a person who's trying to help their parents or parent and partner at a time of life where they most need it. It helps them in turn, where they've got young children to be looked after as well. So it's a two-way street here. I think it's a development that won't, in fact, it'll enhance the area. So on that ground, I would propose that we grant.
Mark, are we happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Convener, that would obviously require the amendment would require somebody to second that.
Okay, if we have a
second that. I'll second that.
We've got a point of order in from Councillor Beveridge.
Beveridge.
Harry, I missed part of the presentation with connectivity issues. I was kicked off a wee bit just for a couple of minutes, but it was during Gordon's presentation. I take it I can't vote on this. Thanks.
If you are bombed out, then you can't vote. If you missed any part of it, then I'm sorry, you can't vote on this. Okay, right. So we have a proposal from myself, seconded by Linda Anderson, and we have a counter proposal from Michael, seconded by who was it? Seconded it?
I'll second it. Michael Coyle.
Michael. Okay. Mark, can you go through the motions on that then? Take it to the vote.
Absolutely, convener. So just to clarify, the motion will be if the members are in favour of refusing the application, that will be the motion. If members are in favour of granting the application, that will be the amendment, just for clarity. And I'll run through the elected members in alphabetical order. So we've got Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge is unable to vote. He missed part of the presentation. So we'll then go to Councillor Burgess.
Motion.
Councillor M. Coyle.
Amendment.
We'll then get Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
I'll need to abstain because I also lost connectivity for a second or two.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Farouk.
Amendment.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldsack.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor T. Johnston.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon.
Motion.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren. Councillor McLaren, you're on mute, sorry.
Amendment.
Councillor McPake.
This will be a close vote. Amendment.
Councillor Coyle, could you mute your microphone, please, during the course of the vote, if you don't mind? Thank you. Councillor McVeigh. That was motion, Councillor McVeigh. I got that there. Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Stokes is an apology. No, sorry, Councillor Shields first, sorry.
Motion.
Councillor Stokes is an apology. Councillor Stubbs.
Amendment.
And finally, Councillor Watson.
Amendment.
Thank you, elected members. Following the vote, the motion to refuse the application attracted 12 votes. The amendment to grant attracted 10 votes. Therefore, the application is refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. Thank you for that, colleagues. I don't have any other business, so I'll thank you for your attendance and have a good day.
Thank you.